So we have a little handout for you to fill out, please. Yeah. Oh, okay. So then, this is just the lunar calendar and a little bit the phases work.
Thank you.
I have pencils. Oh, okay. So our presentation's on the phases of the moon. I'm Melissa.
I'm
in case you
Kayla.
forgot.
I mean, they might forget.
Okay.
We're old, remember?
Okay, so here's the lunar calendar for this month. It's gonna be on your sheet. It already has the different phases listed on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, the paper is percentages.
Oh, okay, so it has the percentages, and we'll get into how the percentages work with the different corresponding phases. So today we're on is it the 20th
20th.
today? So right now we're in a waxing gibbous, and very quickly approaching the full moon, so be on the lookout for that. And then here is the calendar for December, slightly different. Kayla.
He sent me the picture.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
well then never mind.
That's the one that's on their sheet.
And then this one is for you guys to fill out with the corresponding phases. You can do that after we explain them, because it might be a little difficult now.
So this is a list of all the phases we will be explaining throughout our presentation, beginning with the new moon, and going to the waxing crescent, the first quarter, the waxing gibbous, and then a full moon, which is when the moon is at its brightest point, the waning gibbous, last quarter, and the waning crescent.
So I'm going to explain how the phases work, pretty much, just to start off with. Okay, so we're going to use you guys as the placeholder for the sun. So we'll start at the new moon. So in the positioning, the moon would be here, the sun behind it, and then the earth, then Minnesota right here. So the reason we see it like a new moon is because the sun isn't reflecting off of the face of it. It actually has a face. I don't know if you can see that. So we can't see the face of the moon because the sun isn't reflecting off of it, so it appears as the new moon where it's completely dark. And then as the moon goes over here, only half of the face of the moon is being illuminated by the sun. So this would be the first quarter. And then as we have the moon back here with the sun fully illuminating it, this would be our full moon, where the werewolves come out and you can take nice pictures. And then finally, it's the third quarter where the right half of the moon is lit up, and then right back to the new moon. And then that's how it works with the sunlight. I'll try not playing with this the whole time.
So this is a video kind of showing the moon's
Steady.
orbit. As you can see, we are just directly facing the one portion of the moon. We only see the one face of the moon. This is the view that we would see from Earth as it goes to those points. The sunlight is on the left side of the screen, so right now we are entering the new moon phase where we can't see anything at all.
Oh, and the moon is also tidally locked with the Earth, so that's, as Mr. Ward said, we see one side lit up and one side's not. But it's still going to be one side gets to see the light throughout the month, because it's still orbiting as it orbits Earth.
How does it do that every time?
I don't know.
Every time we break away to a video or something,
It'll
it
expose.
disconnects the kids' iPads.
Okay, so there's two phases of the moon. Well, not two phases, but two modes of the moon. We have waxing, so I like to think of that as the moon powering up. So it's going from empty or new moon up to a full moon. So the brightness is on the right as we increase going into the full moon. And then I like to think of waning as the moon powering down, like it's used up its energy and now it's like your phone battery dying. And that's from going from a full moon into a new moon. And then it comes back over there. And then that's when it's dark on the right half.
This is a crescent moon. It's when the moon is less than half illuminated. This form of a crescent moon is sometimes called either a toenail or a fingernail, whichever grosses you out less.
And then we have the gibbous shape. That's anytime the moon is more than 50% illuminated. And it's just, there's no fancy name for this one, just a gibbous.
These are the two quarters that exist in our moon cycle. It's when the moon is perfectly 50% illuminated. There's the first quarter, which is when it's illuminated on the right, and the last or third quarter when it's illuminated on the left.
And then we have the new moon again, which is when we can't physically, we can't visibly see the moon from where we are in the sky. Sometimes you can just see like a little bit of it outlined, like because the moon obviously doesn't totally go away. We can still see a little bit. And then sometimes during a new moon, it's actually a solar eclipse, which is the moon. We'll actually get into that. So.
And this is the full moon when the moon is completely illuminated in the sky, and this time sometimes results in a lunar eclipse. This is a lunar and solar eclipse. The lunar eclipse occurs when the moon passes through Earth's shadow, so the moon is farther away from the sun and on the opposite side of Earth. And this is sometimes called a blood moon because of its red-orange color. And the solar eclipse is when the moon passes in between the Earth and the sun, right here, and it results in a shadow of the moon on the Earth. But this isn't all that's about solar eclipses, so we're actually going to pass this on to Mr. Ward,
Our special
So-
speaker of the night.
so he can help us explain some more about eclipses.
Just real.
Or do you have your own?
I've got my own,
Oh, okay.
of course.
So yeah, that's all from us. Any questions?
So how far is the moon on average from Earth?
That's a
Well, it just depends on where it is in the face. They
I think that
actually
comes
tell-
later in the presentation.
I will.
Yes. The question will be.
We're just phasing.
I do want some clarification on the tidally locked business.
Okay, so where's the globe? Okay, so tidally locked meaning it's always facing one side, but as the moon does go around, it does slowly, I'm going to turn with it a little bit, it does also slowly turn, so as it orbits the Earth, it also, what do you call it when the,
Spins on its
yeah,
axis.
it spins on its axis as well, so it's the same, it's like one in one.
So the spin rate and the orbit rate are the same?
Yes.
So a day on the moon is the same as like a moon year?
Yes.
So we always see the face of the moon.
And that might seem like a weird coincidence, but there are a few moons in our solar system that actually have that feature. All right. So, Brianna, do you know how the moon cuts his hair?
He flips it.
Are you
Yeah.
gonna beep?
Yeah, I am going to.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
I can like, you do that. You can do. She's not clicked for you.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about eclipses. We kind of thought the girls had enough to do without going into more detail on eclipses, so I took that one over from them. Beep. This is a picture I took. We had a partial solar eclipse in October of 2014. I don't know if you remember this. But you know, with the solar eclipse, you don't want to look directly at it. We never want to look directly at the sun because it's bad for your eyes. But a little trick you can use to still view a solar eclipse is I took my binoculars and I held this little blue piece of like felt paper and I projected through the binoculars onto the paper And so you can see the imprint of the moon here, kind of taking a little bite out of the sun. And I thought I had some crud on my binoculars, so I cleaned the lenses and it was still there, so I got a different pair of binoculars and it was still there. And it occurred to me, those are sunspots. Okay, those are areas on the sun where it's a different temperature than the surroundings, and so it appears darker. It's a little bit cooler, and that's where we call that solar activity or solar flares. So that was really cool. I thought, holy cow, I captured that. And of course, I had my daughter out there, and she just loved this time with me. And lunar eclipses are way more enjoyable to observe, and I've documented numerous lunar eclipses. But I don't know why I don't have any pictures of that in my little presentation here. And another thing I like to do is quite often Venus and the crescent moon are near each other. I don't know how many dozens of pictures I have of the crescent moon and Venus also. But that's kind of a fun thing to capture. I've got them from down in the Gulf of Mexico and up deer hunting, and so that's kind of fun. Beep. So, how does a solar eclipse happen? What is the moon phase? What is the orientation between the Earth, the moon, and the sun? What is a lunar eclipse? How does that happen? And so that's what I'm going to go through a little bit right now. So a solar eclipse, like the girls were just showing us, what's going to happen is the moon is going to pass between the Earth and the sun. So we're during the moon new phase. All of the energy that's reflected off the sun is going back that way, away from Earth. And so what will happen is the shadow of the moon will be cast onto the surface. Last summer we had that, or 2 summers ago we had that happen, where the shadow went all the way from the left coast through the right coast, and it was viewed by millions of people. And so that was a pretty cool occurrence. I didn't get a chance. Did anybody get a chance to go see that?
Overcast day.
Huh?
It was an overcast day.
Up here it was, yeah. You got a chance? Was it?
Yeah,
Worth
we
the trip.
drove 4 hours to go see it, and
Okay.
it was great.
Yeah. One of my colleagues drove down to Kansas City or St. Louis to see it, somewhere in Missouri, and he said it was like a 15-hour drive back from there because everyone left all at the same time. And so you're on I-35 and you're doing 35 miles an hour all the way from Missouri up to Minneapolis. So that's a pretty cool thing. I can only imagine back in the day, this was quite a frightful experience for the people, okay, because they didn't know any better. And so they would see this happening, and of course the fear I only imagine was somebody did something and angered the gods, and so now we need to rectify that. And of course we know better now, but back in the day, I can only imagine that that was quite a frightful experience. Here's some different vantage points of a solar eclipse. Sometimes with the solar eclipse, you'll be able to actually see different features of the moon right on the limb where there are impact craters. You'll be able to see the sunlight shining through some of those craters. So that's a pretty neat thing to see. You need a special apparatus to view that, but that's some from our recent solar eclipse. Oh, and this one, that's pretty cool. You can see the shadow of the, actually see the shadow of the moon on the United States. That's pretty neat. We have a new moon phase each month. Okay, we just looked at that. Why no solar eclipse each month?
Do you want me to, oh,
Sure, slide down that thing. Okay. Typically, what happens is the moon is not on the same plane as the Earth and the sun, and so usually that shadow just gets cast off into space. Can you click on that little thing right there?
this one, or
No, you need to click on that little circle.
the corner?
Corner circle. Oh,
No.
look where I'm pointing.
In the
Left.
box. Oh, sorry.
Usually I'm on my smartboard and I can just touch that. That kind of drives me nuts. And this is a neat little animation that shows the solar eclipse in action. So we've got sun shining over here, Earth shadow, the moon shadow. It looks like it should be impacting Earth when you look from above, but when you look at it from the side, you can see the shadow is not impacting Earth. But on that special happenstance where the Earth and the Moon and the Sun are all in the same plane, then that shadow will pass across Earth's surface. Yeah, that's good enough. I don't want to be up here too long because the kids are doing this. Lunar eclipse, this is the one, like I said, this is way more enjoyable. I've been out there at 35 below documenting these things, and I go out there when the bugs are biting, but this is really fascinating to see. And now we're talking about a full moon, so I need to switch my orientation here. And again, it's just a happenstance where instead of the moon passing above Earth's shadow, the moon is going to move into Earth's shadow. These can last for hours. When you see a solar eclipse, you might only catch a few minutes of it. But the lunar eclipse can last for hours, so it's a much more enjoyable thing. We don't need to click on that thing, so beep. And the great thing about this is the moon takes on an incredibly eerie orangish glow, but only when it passes totally in